Hey guys, John Martini here from jokermartini.com. Today I'll be going over a tool I wrote for 3ds Max called Cobwebs. Here are a few images that were produced using the tool itself. And here we go. Bring in some boxes here. Let's get rid of these. So we'll go over the main strands here first, leaving this at 0 to turn them off. So the starting location is the first knot in each spline being created for the cobweb. The format type ends up affecting the end position of each main strand. So if we do surface and then random, it will randomly generate a spline starting on the surface of each box and then randomly putting the end knot on the surface of each box. So by having unique on, that forces cobwebs to have the ability to generate the same spline on the starting and ending location. That way you don't have 20 splines that are just right on top of each other. Now if we do center, what that does is it takes the average center position of the selected objects, and we'll use that as the end point for each spline in the main strands. So now what else we can do is order. So that means the ending position for each spline will be on the next object based on the selection order. Now, if you turn on loop, it'll go through all the selected objects, and then once you hit the last object in the selection, it'll loop back to the first selected object. So with this, what we can do is turn on pivot, which then our starting location will be the pivot of every object, and its end location will also be the pivot, but based on the order of the selection. And see, since we have force unique on, it's not going to generate more than one spline because it's going in the order. Now if we turn off unique and run it again, now we have a bunch of splines overlaying each other, which usually you don't want. Now you can turn on verts and it'll generate the starting position randomly on the vert of each object, and the end point will be randomly generated on each box, but in order of the selection. So if we apply noise, what that does is it affects the position of each knot in the spline, giving a little, kind of think of the noise modifier being applied to a spline. It just adjusts the position of the knots to make it a little more irregular. Let's see. Now what subdivisions does is it'll subdivide each spline, adding more knots inside of it. So if we'll just do a few here, I'll show you the vertex ticks. Now if you turn this to 0, you'll just get a start and end knot and then one in the middle. Turn off the noise. Turn these down. So if we turn this up to 2 or 3, you'll see the number of knots on each spline now is a lot higher. Now you can usually, that comes into play later on when we want to do a cobweb and have the radial spline going around. That'll come into play later on when we want to do a radial spider web. So smooth will adjust the knot type on each spline, but for now we'll just leave it on smooth. Moving into the gravity section, so -10, what that adjusts is the position of the middle knot on each spline. So they can drape to a maximum of 10 and anything up to 0. So if we make this +10, they'll go north and south. So if you turn these all on, you'll get a radial offset. Now what length solver does is it adjusts the amount of draping on each spline based on the length of each spline in the spider web. So the longest spline will drape the most and the shortest one will be more taut looking. Turn this off. So we have just -10 to 0. So with length solver off, you'll see they will all drape anywhere randomly from -10 to 0. Now with it on, the longest spline will drape the most, and you'll see the shortest one is the most taut. So this long spline here drapes the most, the shortest ones. Moving on to substrands. By turning on include ends, that allows the substrands to possibly start or end at the location of the first or last knot in the main strands. By turning on unique, that works the same way as the main strands, forcing the calculations to not allow for several substrands to be built on top of each other. So if we select all these, we'll turn this on to 3. It's on a hidden layer there. There we go. So they're just randomly generated right now. Now if we turn on, change our order type of the main strands to order, and we go through and select these, we'll skip the middle one. Now the substrands are being randomly generated on the main strands. You see this connects here and down here. Now we can turn off force unique and run it. Doesn't change too much. We'll do pivot, keep force unique. And what we can do is by turning on radial, it's going to try to sort the main strands in a radial fashion using those positions to then generate substrands. So if we do order and we select these in an order, the main strands will go in a circular fashion, but the substrands are going to try to wrap around them, giving a cool effect. Now what we can do on the main strands, if we choose a center point, say this middle object, and we move it up here, whoops, select all these, and then run it, you see we get a radial effect on the substrands leading up to this targeted endpoint. Now what we can do is, instead of choosing target, choose center, and we'll get something that looks similar to a cobweb. When doing radial, the substrands, it only matters if it's 0 or 1. If it's 0, they're not going to get created. If it's 1, there's going to be a ring created for every knot on the main strand. So to adjust the amount of substrands you have, for radial and spiral, you need to up the amount of subdivisions on the main strands. So if I turn this to 10, make this, we'll leave it at 4, you won't notice a difference in the cobweb. If I make it 1, it's not going to matter either. The substrand number only matters for random and target. So what we can do is spiral. Now what spiral does differently from radial is it makes one spline that's continuous for each ring. So we have one spline that just goes round and round and round until it reaches the center. If we make the subdivisions here a little less, it'll be more noticeable. So you can follow that one path all the way around, and it'll take you right to the center. Whereas radial does a solid spline ring for each main strand knot. So if you change this to target, what you can do is make the main strands start randomly along the path of the main strands, but the ending knot for each substrand will be this targeted object. Two. Oh, yeah. See, I wasn't getting anything growing up here because I don't have any substrands. I'll do 20. So if we do 30, make it more noticeable. There we go. So what's cool is we can do target on both of them, and then they'll all grow to that target. So you'll see some of these substrands will start on the main strands, growing up to that. Now don't forget, with the target objects you can also use a point helper, so then it doesn't generate on the surface, but rather the pivot. So the main strands are going to grow up to this, and the substrands will grow down towards this. So on the main strands you can still do different format types like radial, and you can achieve some pretty cool results. And then substrands also have noise, just like the main ones, which applies the position offset for each knot in the spline. And gravity works the same way as well. So if you do -20 on the substrands and then 0 on the main strands, you'll see just the substrands get draped. We'll do center. There you go. So if we turn this off, everything will be rather linear. Then what we can do is turn on a random gap percentage. Now what that does is randomly, based on the percentage, will randomly delete segments of the radial spline only, not the main strands. Those don't get affected at all by this. So we'll do 20%. So randomly just knocks out chunks of the substrands. So if we do 50, we're not going to have much left, but it still works. So if we up this to get more detail in the cobweb, we'll turn on a little radial noise. Drape these as well. -5. This is a little too high. And there we go, we got a cobweb. Now so lastly we have the distance cutoff range. Now this kind of monitors the length of the splines, both the main and the substrands. So anything shorter than this value and longer than this value won't be created. And you can choose what strands get affected by this. So we have 3 boxes here, one at 0, 50, and 150. So if we do a cutoff range of 1 centimeter, so nothing less than 1 centimeter long gets created, and then we'll do 75. So a spline longer than 75 won't get created as well. So if we select all these, do affect main strands, create cobwebs, we're only going to see splines getting created here. Now if we do, say 55, or we'll do 60 and 120. So now we'll only have splines created between these 2 boxes and not these 2. Force unique. So it's simply just a limitation of the splines being created. This becomes useful when doing like power lines, for instance. You don't want a power line that is 1 centimeter long being created, because that wouldn't be useful. So going back over a few situations I've come across when using this, we'll go back to the circular pattern. So what we do here, we'll do pivot, unique, and we'll do radial, we'll just turn this on to 2, and we'll do include ends. And we'll do center. So when we create this, turn off the gap percentage, we get our spider web. Now sometimes you don't want a ring to be on this outside loop. What you can do is turn off include ends, and then you'll see it skips the first row of knots in the main strand. Just showing some more examples here. We've got like a candlestick here. Just do random, turn off the substrands. Oops. And we'll just do surface. You can go crazy with this and add tons of them. Select it again, run more. Now with the candlestick, we'll do surface random 60. We'll do 2 substrands and we'll turn on random substrands. You can get some cool results there. Maybe try radial. Now when doing spider webs, if you want to get more detail on the radial main strands, what you'll do is just create more of them. So we'll change this back to pivot, unique, center, just do 30, and do radial. And we'll turn some gravity back on to get some draping in the spider web. -5 for the substrands. And there you go. Cobwebs, and that's cobwebs for you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at jokermartini@hotmail.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And If you guys have any ideas for improvements or things you'd like to see me add to this tool, please let me know. I'd be glad to add to it. And thanks.